Welcome to the podcast of Data and Analytics in Business. We will learn from the leading industry experts using data and analytics to solve the problems and create values in practice. We will also learn where the industry is heading to and how data and analytics will shape the industry in the future. Most importantly, how they are preparing their business for digital transformation and disruption in the future. I'm your host, Jason Tan, and thank you for listening. Hello, Antony, or shall I call you Ed? Welcome to the Analytics Show podcast. I am super excited to have you on the show, and thank you so much for taking the time from your holiday to chat with me.
My absolute pleasure, Jason. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Okay. Now I'm gonna start with a little bit about what you are doing when you are not working. So, from my research, I know that you are a member on multiple boards. So currently, IAPA and the Center of Business Analytics at the University of Melbourne. Share with us more about the roles that you play here.
Yeah, no worries. So IAPA is the Institute of Analytics Professionals Australia. It's been going for quite a while. Started out as a volunteer-only organisation. And credit where credit's due, I was not part of the founding group who put IAPA together. But IAPA started getting a little too big for volunteer time only. So they reached out, and ADMA at the time picked up the organisation and has helped push it forwards. When that decision was made, I was asked to be the chairperson, and very, very, just to clarify, I'm not the chair of IAPA, I'm the chair of the advisory board. So IAPA is trying to do a number of things, but broadly speaking, IAPA is really trying to kind of promote analytics, data analytics, as an enabler for organisations, and not just, but importantly, creating value for organisations, but also wants to champion the good, the analytics for good. Wants to help analytics professionals be recognised, acknowledged, and seen by the senior members of organisations as a real value add to the organisation, and that certainly hasn't been the case as analytics emerged in quite a number of organisations, and then on top of that, champion the analytics community. So I think we've just closed off our fourth year of the top 50 analytics leaders in Australia. So we do that every year. It's a fantastic celebration. We get some amazing nominations, and it gives us the ability to showcase individuals. And a number of them have used that acknowledgement. Marketers have been doing this for the longest time. Yeah. The best ad, the best brand campaign, the marketer of the year. Nobody's looking after the analytics professionals. So that is IAPA, and we've recently, it's been 2 years now, I think. ADMA and IAPA are now part of the Australian Computer Society, which has been a fantastic merger. The weight of such an established group like ACS giving us the ability to leverage that has been enormous. So that's IAPA. And you did send me some cheat notes beforehand, and I failed to pick it up. The Centre for Business Analytics, very, very formally, the Centre for Business Analytics is not at the University of Melbourne, it's at the Melbourne Business School. So the Melbourne Business School and the University of Melbourne are very, very two distinct organisations, but they have very, very close alignment, so the confusion is easy to make. So my role there, the founding professor, Ujwal Kande, I think 8 years ago, reached out and said, I'm thinking about forming this centre. I was on board straight away. So It was beyond simply teaching people how to code and some techniques. While that is still very, very important, there's a lot in there in that course about influencing skills, about leadership skills, etc. So it really is trying to help the emerging, from the grassroots level, analytics professionals. I should go back to IAPA as well, is also all about building out those influencing skills for analytics professionals. So I've been doing this now. You'll see, we're recording this as a video, so people who are watching the video will see the grey hairs in my beard that's slowly backing up the side of my head. So I've been doing this for the longest time, and I'm not wise. I've just made all of the mistakes. So if I can take the experience of my mistakes and help these organisations accelerate their communities, then I'm absolutely for it. And for me personally, what I want is, I want the analytics professional to be recognised as a member of the organisation. And Jason, you're a little bit too young, but you may have had the experience where you're walking through the organisation. People will say, "Oh, there's the data scientist, or there's the analyst. They're the really smart people." And really, that was a backhanded compliment, which said, these people have got these skills which we really don't understand, and we can't really engage with them. So we'll just call them the really smart people. And my desire is to move away. When you're young in your career, being called the smart person, fantastic, but it gets a bit tiresome after a while. My hope is that the next generation, while they are recognised for their skills and the value that they bring, they are seen as an equal amongst peers. And so that's what I'm trying to do with my involvement with these groups. That was a long answer to a very short question, by the way.
No, I think that was a great answer. And I was going to say, would you say then your objective is to help the analytic professional, to help the data scientists to find a seat at the decision-making table? Because I think to some extent, as much as the world like to claim that data is the new oil, and when there is a data breach, that is the oil breach, as the joke that I pick up somewhere. But as much as people say data is the new oil, and everyone is saying they are data-driven, everything is data, guided by data, but still, we are never quite at the decision-making table, because everything that we do is still rely on the technology, the core IT system. We almost feel like we are just a subset, but we never get to the big table.
Yeah, no, your observation is right. Have a look at just point your eyes to the biggest, most successful organizations in the world today, and my eyes immediately go to Google and eBay and Amazon and Alibaba and those sorts of organizations. And what they have done is they have bet the house on data and analytics driving their organizations forwards. And in fact, I don't recall the number, but Amazon year after year after year would take any profits that it made and throw it back into data, throw it back into infrastructure that then became, their cloud capability. They led that way there. They backed the data and the ability to use that data as their way to get to the positions to where they are today. And so, these new modern companies, they get it. It is, you still need to have a strategy and a viable product, etc. But data is right up there. It's not at the front, at the pointy end. It's it's on the battlefront with everything else that goes on with the organisation. Whereas, and I know you've asked me to think about, what's the book that I wish I'd read earlier, and we'll come to that a bit later.
Yep.
But legacy organisations, those organisations that have been around for the longest time, they've been successful. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been around for the longest time. So these 100-year-old companies, they made their decisions, and I'm being very, very facetious here. So your listeners, please take this with a grain of salt, but it's just to make the point. For 100 years, these organizations have made decisions based on the gut instinct of, the people in power, right? They've woken up one morning and said, right, we're going in this direction. And so everybody says, okay, well, we follow the leader. That's what the leader told us to do. Those organisations that got to 100 years, their leaders made good judgments, or they got lucky and they had made good guesses. But now what you have is these organisations with this long heritage of senior people being able to make gut decisions and everybody following. And now what you have is this wave of capability, data science, analytics, BI, and the worst case scenario is a very senior person says, the reason why we're not selling this product over here is because that community, the demographic is blah, blah, blah. And this very junior person can quite rightly, run a couple of queries and say, actually, with that thing that you just said, that's wrong. But the data just does not support that at all. And now what you've got a junior intern, for example, who has never been on the shop floor, who has never sold the product, who has never made the product, who has never gone from, cashier to store manager to region manager to state manager to CEO, which is the way a lot of these organisations kind of made their, the leaders made their ways. All of a sudden, you've got somebody who's never had that same heritage and experience as those senior leaders disagreeing with them. And quite rightly, that's confronting. And so, we have this tension, and I think we're lucky/unlucky enough to be in the generation where this tension exists. Because our children, when they get to these corporate roles, it's going to be like, I think seatbelts came to Australia in 1972. And so, our generation just look back and say, what? You didn't have seatbelts in cars? That's crazy. You have ashtrays inside your car? That's crazy. Our children, in 20 years' time, are going to look back and say, what? You made decisions without data? What? How did you do that? And so that's where we are today. It's mostly those legacy organisations. Some of them are doing amazing work in accelerating their capabilities so that the data individuals do get further up to the decision-making table. But we're still fighting that tension between instinctual leadership versus evidence-based leadership. Again, another long answer.
No, I think a good question deserves a long answer, so I got to credit that to myself.
Yeah. And look, and there's another thing, you and I, as very technical people from heritage, we could disagree on something, right? Something technical. And so, 20 years ago, we'd stand in front of a blackboard. Today, we stand in front of a whiteboard. And one of us will grab the marker and say, okay, let's figure this out. We'd write out the first principles of the formula that we're debating. And then we'd work down the right-hand side and we'd simplify and we'd do this and we'd divide by, and we'd simplify. And then one of us will look at the other one and say, Jason, hey, I was wrong, you were right. Yeah, it's black and white. It's up on the screen there. And so that's our heritage, from the time that we were children for those people who emerge into analytics and data science. Whereas the rest of the organisation, I shouldn't say the rest, a large part of the organisation that we need to influence, they have come up in a world of ambiguity, politics, bureaucracy, and that is not naturally in our DNA as well. And so for us to kind of fight our way through that, we're fighting a war in which we don't have, we just don't have the weapons that war is asking for at the moment. We have pure, unadulterated logic, and we just say, look at it, just everybody, I can't believe we're disagreeing about this, and that's not the way the world works.
I think that is probably where the importance of understanding the human behavior and understanding the customer is coming into the picture. I mean, understanding what your colleague, what your stakeholder want, and understand what drive that. I think that is perhaps what is the analytic professional need to have. Do you think so? I think to some extent, sometimes I kind of think that we just try to put our heads down, get the things done, present the data, and hopefully that the world or the people will believe of what is being presented and get convinced of taking the action. But the reality, though, is not as simple as that. Sometimes about that influencing skill, like you were describing earlier, where you were hoping to pass on to the emerging analytic professional. I think that is probably one of the things that I probably would say to myself of someone who have young kids. I would probably say those are the skill set that I wish I would show them instead of the technicality of the algebra or probability. Yeah,
absolutely. And that is, so we have in IARPA, that's one of the things that we've developed, influencing skills.
So my next question for you then is, do you think you can foresee a future where there is a clear segregation of responsibility and ownership between the IT and analytics team, so each of them can perform their best work?
Yeah, absolutely. Now this is my view, and I love having this debate with individuals. So if people want to reach out after they've watched or listened to this podcast, I'm absolutely up for the conversation. My experience, and this is a sample size of one, we're talking about a podcast that is talking about big data, so it's complete opposite of evidence. When the analytics or the data science function is housed within the IT function, and I'm generalizing, but what you get is you'll get some really cool analytics products that are supported unbelievably well with a database that is rock solid, that has a higher chance of not delivering business value. So the algorithm will work, the code will be efficient, it'll be monitored, the data feeds will be pristine, but you'll have missed the actual need of the business. Where I've seen data science analytics work extremely well is where it's separated from IT. So what you want IT to do is you want them to champion great engineering, supportability, robust platforms, clean data, all those sorts of things. And what you want out of your analytics community is you want them really close to the business, working in the grey, trying to figure out, this problem, this really hard problem we're trying to solve. How do we trick the data into helping us solve that problem, and then having that healthy tension between the analytics and IT group to build that solution. I really do think that your analytics, the closer your data science and analytics gets to the problem, as close to the customer, if it's a B2C business, as close to the customer as possible, that is where you get value, because it gives you, I never worry when I'm hiring an individual. I'll look at their technical skills, they're okay. I never worry about even a mediocre technical person becoming a great technical person, because that's just, if that person is ambitious enough, you can send them on enough courses, you can buddy them up with a principal data scientist. There's any number of ways to make them technically unbelievable. However, the struggle is context. Why are you solving this problem? What is the actual problem? When somebody says we're trying to solve X, they haven't necessarily thought about it long and deeply enough to give you all the context. So you've got to go and get it, right? So in answer to your question, like I genuinely think a separation from technology and analytics, I think that's really important. I think having a healthy tension between the two can only really happen when they report into different lines of the business.
And I think the way that I feel like the constraint and the challenges that we have, where for most part of the world and most of part of the organization, where analytics is housed within the enterprise IT team, is partly because the IT team, most of the organization, I mean 95% of the world is of the organization in the world never actually built their system from scratch, like Google, Amazon, or Facebook, where they have the flexibility of understanding things in and out, and they can tear apart all of those things. But most of us, we actually buy our enterprise system from someone else, and that reduces our flexibility. And hence, I think it because of that, we inherit that sort of organization structure where analytics has got to be inside the enterprise. So I think maybe that is probably the biggest reason. Do you think that would help to explain of why of that?
The tension, the inability. Right?
Yeah, I was trying to think the right word.
Look, I think there are many reasons. I think the analytics community has a role to play, getting closer to the business, getting closer to the strategy. I disagree with what I'm about to say, but most organisations want this, so it's important to acknowledge it and probably chase it down. And that is, start small, prove your worth. Get some runs on the board.
Yeah.
Do that. Certainly do that, but also know that time is not your friend. Organisations, they need to change. They need to pivot. The average lifespan of a CEO, I think in Australia average lifespan, average tenure of a CEO is like 3 years, 4 years. So you actually don't have a long time to show, from this pivot table to this deep learning algorithm. Yeah. So
that's a good one.
Yeah. On the flip side, organisations, they have a responsibility to understand that if they don't get on board, they will be disrupted. There is nothing surer. Everybody wants to point the finger at Kodak. Don't be the next Kodak, right?
Sorry, what's Kodak?
Yeah, you're too young. Kodak made most of their money on camera film.
Oh, Kodak. I didn't pick it out. I was thinking about CODEC. What is Kodak? Yeah, I'm actually not that young. I am 40 years old.
You're young.
Now,
yeah.
Still young.
old enough to know Kodak, but and so GFC proved this. Organisations are not too big to fail.
I know, right? Yes, yeah. Exactly.
And so have a look at every organisation that's been disrupted and blown out of the water. It's almost always been from a modern, data-driven player. So organisations need to understand that, and I'm answering some questions that you got later in the script, but organisations need to understand that, first of all, you have enormous amounts of data. Your data is unique. Even if you are, I'll use the example of Coles and Woolworths. Just caveat. I've never worked for Coles. I've never worked for Woolworths, and I genuinely do not know what they are doing with their data, other than the usual things, basket analysis, etc. I'm sure they're doing. But you look at Coles and Woolworths, and you think, well, they sell the same things. They're the same company. They've got the same data. Well, they don't. They don't have the same data, because I can guarantee you that while there's a large overlap in the consumers who shop at Coles and Woolworths, there's a large number of customers who only shop at one or the other. And that makes your data unique. So organizations need to understand, yeah, I may be one of 4 big banks, or I may be one of 2 or 3 FMCGs, supermarket type organizations in Australia. I may be one of, 3 petrol stations. Your data is still unique. And customers today the conversation is moving away from a big brother, oh, you're using my data, I can't believe, you know too much about me. Consumers are moving away from that conversation to, hey, I expect you to be secure with my data, and I expect you to respect my privacy, and I expect you to not use my data for evil, but I also expect I'm giving you all this information about me. I expect you to deliver me better value and better service. And organizations still haven't quite, in general, organizations are slow to the party to understand that the consumers, these kids, your kids are 1.5, 3. Our youngest son is 16. He throws out data like it's going out of fashion, and his expectation is, these apps, these services that he uses, that they bring him value. And in 10 years' time, my 16-year-old son, he's going to be the group that are spending all the money keeping these organizations afloat. We're going to be hiring and spending less. Unless you are ready today to meet the needs and the expectations of that next generation, I think you're dead in the water.
I think one of the best analogy that I have heard of is that we unconsciously expect the big 4 bank, the big 4 insurer, these to deliver us the experience that we are so used to from getting from Amazon and Netflix, where literally you know exactly what I'm going to get, and you are going to deliver it to me in less than 2 days for free. That is the expectation that we unconsciously expecting, and we are going to have that. We are going to extend that expectation to more and more organizations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you think about like the Netflix example for me is always a great example, because organizations say, Netflix have done this amazingly well. We need to try to be like Netflix. Actually, what Netflix did was they understood that I used to go to my local Blockbuster to hire videos, and the woman behind the desk, she said, "Oh, Antony, good to see you again. Actually, there's this movie that I think you'd like." Like, she saw what I rented. She knew me because I was local, right? And we had this relationship. And so she gave me this personalized service. And I use that word personalized very deliberately, because that's what Netflix does incredibly well, right? It says, I've seen what you've watched. I think you'd like this other stuff. If we flip back to the banks, I can remember walking into the bank with my dad, and my dad would walk in, and all the tellers would say, "George, hi, hey, it's good to see you." And the bank manager would know my dad. They'd know what his products were. He had a small business, so they knew what his needs were. Our local baker, I'd walk in, he was reaching for the loaf of bread that he knew that we wanted as a. So organizations have understood that the relationship is unbelievably important. But how do you create that one-to-one relationship when you've got 5 million customers? And consumers, like I said, consumers are now expecting it. And the only way you can do that 5 million times is through data, particularly when you don't interact with a human at the bank or a human at Blockbuster/Netflix anymore. You're interacting with the bot. The only way you do it is through data.
or how can you empower the teller or the person who is serving the customer with all of those data to serve the customer?
Yeah, and that's another conversation. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, coming back to this key part about helping the analytic professional to find a voice at the decision table. My final question for this topic is, aside from the usual leadership skill set, all those things, what do you think is other key skill set that you would recommend for the analytic professional to pick up in order to achieve this objective of that we can be more than just providing the data. We could help driving the organization to the next level.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think there are two things, and they go hand in hand with each other. The first one, again, a caveat. I'm not talking about an individual. I'm certainly not thinking about an individual as I say this word, but I am thinking about our community in general. I think the first word that comes to mind for me is humility. For the longest time, anybody who kind of emerges through mathematical science, for the longest time since primary school, we've always been told, oh, wow, you must be really smart. Well, look, you're so clever. The mathematics is real. I hated mathematics when I went to school. You're really smart. And so the danger with hearing that over and over and over again is, by the time we get to our work, our career, we think we have all the answers because we've been told for 20 years we're really smart. And the reality is we're just really good at this thing that, gets taught badly. And so the people who have a genuine love and passion and natural aptitude towards it, they're the ones who emerge, and everybody else gets left behind. It's not that everybody else is dumb. It's just that we didn't teach them well. So first of all, a little bit of humility to say, actually, we're just really good at this thing. The door in one of our bedrooms upstairs doesn't hang properly. I have no idea how to fix that. When my car needs a service, I have no idea how to do that. We got a new TV, flat screen, put on the wall. How do I had to get one of my older boys to help me I had no idea how to do that. So yeah, we're really smart in this very, very thin slice of stuff, while the rest of life gives us this humility. And then if we can embrace that, because it's actually quite an empowering thing, then with that comes curiosity. So you come into an organization and you say, if I just really quickly talk about my career, I've had 10 years in epidemiology. I had 3 years in fraud. I had 10 years in marketing, 7 years at Seek in HR and recruitment. I do not have any background in biology, physiology, pharmacology. I have publications and all those things. I didn't have any crime prevention background. I didn't study marketing. I had no HR background. But I had careers in all of those things because my skills transcended into those domains, but only because I was prepared to say, hey, you're selling home loans. When you're desperate to find that next sale, what do you do? How do you do it? How do you talk to the customer? And by having that humility to say, I don't know how you do your thing, as you learn that stuff, okay, well, that thing over there, I've got this data that I could kind of use as a proxy. On this thing over here, I could transform this. That's a prediction problem. I know how to do prediction. And so curiosity, there is no, if you only have a very finite amount of development time in your role, sure, go learn another language, go learn another algorithm. But you can do that in your sleep. That's your professional skill. If the organization is giving you time and space to learn something, go and spend time. If you're working in banking, go spend time at a call center listening on calls. Go spend time at a banker, right? Yeah. At the counter, talking to customers. If you're in retail, if you're in any sort of retail, go stack shelves, go talk to customers as I say, could you tell me where the tuner is? I've got no idea. Can you tell me where the nappies are? And then as you start to understand the business and the problems that the business is trying to solve or hasn't been able to solve, more to the point, then you've got this context, this rich, unbelievably rich context. And then you can bring that back into your problem solving. And so the thing that I always talk about to people developing their careers is you have this privileged position. You've got access to the data and you know what you can do with the data. You are one email away or one phone call away from understanding the strategy. Nobody's ever going to say, hey, Anthony, yeah, you asked me about the strategy, but I'm not going to tell you. Yeah, absolutely. Let's have a coffee. Let's talk about what the strategy of the organization is. And then the fourth thing is, oftentimes, you're also a customer. You know, if you work in banking, you're a banking customer. I worked at Seek for 7 years. I've been a hiring manager and I've been a candidate in the market looking for a job. I have the experience of being a consumer. So you're at this very, very, very privileged position where, Venn diagram type, you're right in the middle of all those things. And if you can bring your skills and the access to that data, think about the strategy, what the organization wants to achieve, and then think like a customer to say, if the organization wants to do this, as a customer, what would really resonate is this. If you can bring all that together through curiosity, then that is where magic happens. And so again, the long-winded answer, that's the long-winded answer. The short answer is humility and curiosity.
I also agree with that. I think sometimes people got so bogged down with the technicality of the technology or even the technology itself, this cloud versus that cloud, or this database versus that database, or this structure versus that structure. But really, what the most important thing is about solving that problem for the business. I mean, if they don't understand about the business, how is that possible? I mean, what value does it bring about that table structure if that doesn't solve the problem, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, moving on to your current role as the Chief Data Officer at Bupa. Share with us a little bit more about your works.
Yeah, no worries. So I know a large part of your listenership is not necessarily in Australia. So, for those people, Bupa in Australia is mostly known or recognised through the health insurance brand. Without going down to decimal points, Bupa insures roughly a quarter of Australians who choose to take out private health insurance, just under. But we have a much larger footprint in health. We've got a great optical business, dental business. We've got running out of Australia, we've got an aged care business that does great things there. We also through the Australian arm, we have an aged care business in New Zealand. There are a number of other things we do. We have a couple of arrangements with the government. We do a whole bunch of health-related work with Defence Force. We have an arrangement with the government around visa services, looking after people coming into Australia on a visa and their health needs. So a big health footprint. We are a global organisation. The B in Bupa stands for British. So Bupa is a British United Provident Association. I think the origin of Bupa is roughly, a couple of years after the Second World War. 17 Provident associations, so associations that are put together for the benefit of society, got together to say, hey, how do we make health more affordable for the masses? And so consequently, so Bupa, which was a different brand a while ago here in Australia, was acquired from the UK arm. We're in more than 10 countries around the world. The numbers I have saved here because I always get them wrong. So we get to 31 million customers globally, 85,000 employees, offering. We are in APAC. We are in a smaller part. We're in the Americas. I shouldn't say smaller part, actually. Brazil and Mexico, definitely. And we're in Europe, so we're everywhere. But we are a collection of businesses. We're certainly not like Google started one place and then scaled out globally, or LinkedIn started in one place and scaled out globally. We are a collection of businesses. As a provident association, we're not listed on the stock exchange. Whatever profit we make, we try to throw back into creating more and better health service capability for our clients. So that's who we are. And my role is it's a centralised role in the Australian business, in an Australian business that is a collection of businesses. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out through our data how do we become better as a collective. So that's the role as it exists in Australia today. It's just leaning back on some of the conversations that we've had before. Given the heritage of Bupa, trying to change how we do data as an organisation obviously has some challenges. Notwithstanding, health is highly legislated in Australia, so we have that challenge over the top. But if you can figure out your data in a health environment and just be better for your customers, what more rewarding thing could you be doing in your day-to-day job?
I agree. And one thing that I found is, as I was doing my research for this podcast interview, so there's one thing that I noticed that Bupa repetitively highlight is the care of customer. So where does this, I feel like I get a sense of from what you were just describing already, but I'm still wanting to hear, what does this sense of customer-centric approach stem from, and how important is it for Bupa as a company?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, as an organisation that doesn't deal out profit to its shareholders, the focus being on how do we provide better care, how do we develop better service. Care is at the core of what we do, and so all health organisations, particularly as they try to scale, they'll make mistakes, they'll have some missteps, but right now customer centricity is about giving, when you are sitting in our optometrist chair or our dentist chair, or as we are trying to help you with provision of your health through the health insurance product, how do we do those things such that you are cared for in the best possible way? And so that's one of the things that we're trying to do. How do we, one of our MDs recently gave a great, I shouldn't say oration, but a great speech internally about how they were listening to customer calls. And remember, people, when people are interacting with Bupa, actually they're interacting with Bupa through a low point in their life, even if it's just getting your teeth checked. I don't wake up in the morning thinking, awesome, I'm getting my teeth checked today. I wake up in the morning thinking, I'm another year older, I've got to go to the dentist to get my teeth checked. Are they still going to be, your health is something to worry about. And when consumers interact with a Bupa product, it's because they're trying to prevent something going wrong or something's gone wrong. And so, that care also helps us remember the empathy that we need to have with our customers. They interact with us. And again, going back to the heritage, in 1947, it was about how do these associations get together and find a way to make health more affordable to the masses. Like, it's right in our DNA.
I was gonna highlight one bit that I picked up that I thought is so important to emphasize, that is that all businesses are different, and that because of product nature of the product itself is different, and unlike the bank is, we probably associate all the positive, happy feeling when we are dealing with the bank, at least most of the time. Like, for example, I'm buying my first house, as much as I actually gonna owe the bank for hundreds of $1,000s, but I was like a happy man, right? But what you were just saying is that most of the time when we are dealing with our insurance product, is actually really good point that those feeling may not be so positive, and it's so important to have that empathy and with the customer. I just want to highlight that sort of challenges that different business has because of the nature of the product. And
yeah, absolutely. And going back to context, it's nobody at Bupa ever forgets that we are there for people's health. And it's my first grown-up job was in epidemiology and biostatistics, and
yes,
it was at Monash Medical School, but it was actually located at the Alfred Hospital. And I was straight out of university, so I was young and naive. And my first couple of months, I was an emotional wreck, because I'd be walking through the hospital and I'd see people with injuries, with sickness, with disease. I'd see families crying. So how do I deal with this? And then after a few months, I would go to work, come home, and I realized, I'm not, it hasn't affected me anymore. And what I realized was I had forgotten what I was doing and why I was doing it. And I had to remind myself, just to reconnect, what's the purpose of being in epidemiology and biostatistics if you're not there to help people avoid disease, get through disease to health sooner, etc. And so it was a really important lesson for me to just remember, reflect, why are you doing this thing? I was always proud that I worked at National Australia Bank, because, to your point, we helped people buy their homes. We helped people save for their holidays. We helped, people save to put their kids through education. So yeah, unbelievably important. And again, at Bupa, everybody is very well aware. And the reason why many people choose to work at Bupa is to be part of that care network.
That's wonderful to hear. And coming back to that customer-centric view, do you think that is what leads to the development of variety of the health services, such as the aged care and dental care that you mentioned earlier?
So let me lift myself up and out of Bupa and talk about my experience. So what I've seen about customer centricity through my 10 years in epidemiology and biostats. And by the way, and I've continued to do work in that domain in the evenings as well. But so what I see is I see a very non-customer centric industry. And again, just caveat what I'm about to say with the fact that almost without exception, everybody I've met who is in healthcare is there because they are driven by wanting to help people. So I absolutely do not question the motivations and the drives of these people. These are unbelievably smart people who could be making much more money in bigger corporate roles. They are there because they want to be there. That being said, at the moment, the evolution of healthcare has been what I call very product-centric. So, I'll give you a personal example, and almost everybody who listens can figure out their own example. But a number of years ago, I had some eye disease, and so I had to have operations on my eyes. So I start with my doctor. To go see my doctor, I have to get a referral. So first of all, I need to find an appointment with my doctor. So it revolves around my GP. And I speak to my GP. My GP writes a referral and says, I recommend this ophthalmologist. Thank you very much. I trust your judgment. So then I come home and then I call that ophthalmologist, and then I have to find when have they got their earliest appointment. So now that's revolving around that ophthalmologist. Then I go see that ophthalmologist. We have the appointment. They say, yeah, you've got this problem, this problem, this problem. If we don't do this, you could go blind. Okay, well, let's fix that. Well, the earliest I can do the surgery is on this date. Okay, so now we're revolving around the healthcare provider and the hospital. At no stage was anybody revolving around, this guy who was now petrified that somebody told him that you could lose your eyesight here. People were willing to give me information, but it wasn't customer-centric at all. And people will have these experiences with their doctors, with psychologists, with whatever healthcare provider you can think of. The healthcare industry, I think, is ripe for disruption, where we revolve around the patient. And so we say, the patient comes in, the patient presents with something, or just does a checkup, and then we find something, we need to act upon that thing. How do we scale and digitize the easy things that we can do in the here and now?
Yes.
How do we expedite, from that diagnostic into a treatment plan, into an operation? How do we make it all about this person who has now got high anxiety, who oftentimes has found themselves in this situation due to, maybe some of their own fault or none of their own fault? How do we make everything rotate around this vulnerable individual, as opposed to making this vulnerable individual rotate around those healthcare providers? So I think there is enormous opportunity, and even an example that I think of is, as you get older, Jason, you'll have these problems where you need to do a checkup once a year, see your ophthalmologist, your optometrist, you just got to make sure you do those things. So right now, for me, get my dental checkup, that is at least half a day gone, right?
Yes.
Everybody's busy, but that is now half a day that's gone. When I get my eyes checked, that's at least half a day that's gone. So why isn't anybody thinking about, for example, I turn up to, I pay for this service. We find a way to pay for the service. I rock up to a hotel the night before. I wake up early the next morning. I go get all my bloods taken because I have to fast. So I get all my bloods taken. Then I go back to my room. I have a nice breakfast. Then I come out, and then I see my optometrist. I check, get all those things done. From the optometrist, I then go down the hallway. I see the ophthalmologist. The ophthalmologist starts doing those first things. Then they put the drops in my eyes. They make my eyes dilate. We have to wait 20 minutes, half an hour. So in that 20 minutes, half an hour, I go down to the dentist. The dentist looks me over, gives me a quick check. I come back. The ophthalmologist does their thing. Then by that time, all my bloods have been analysed. I go see the GP. The GP says, look, this is the reading. And then they put me on the treadmill, and then they see how my heart's working. Now that is I'm a privileged, white collar, well-paid individual, but that is a customer-centric service that would take many half days
Yes.
to get back to me in my life. You could get all that stuff done for me in the space of, that could all be done by lunchtime.
Yeah.
How's that for customer centricity? Yeah. And that's just for the preventive stuff. And I'm sure there's more things that you could add in there, right? And so now people say, oh, Antony, that's a grandiose idea. How could we possibly know, all the things that you want, it'll be different for somebody else, etc. The frustrating thing is the data. The data exists to say, Antony, you're in the 40 to 60 age group. This is typically what people do in a 12-month period at your age. But would you be prepared to do this all within the space of a day? Data, that data exists. Yeah.
Exactly.
And with all the capability that we have and all the capability that's emerging through genetic testing, better blood testing, but just history of disease that you have on your medical record. And by the way, Antony, based on all this stuff that we know about you historically, let's just talk about a plan because you're at risk of this, this, and this. So let's just talk about a plan. You know, what are the things that you can put in place to minimize that stuff? And again, the frustrating thing is all that data is available. I provide all that data to the health industry every year. But we don't, you know, that data exists with a pathology lab and my GP and my optometrist and my physio. Like, nobody's thinking, well, if I pulled all that together, imagine what we could do for Antony. And that's just Antony thinking like a data scientist who, you know, is also thinking like a customer. There are so many other individuals who've got combinations of things that they could do in the space of a day and be preventive for further disease that we could just absolutely nail. And so so for me, everybody talks about customer centricity. No senior spokesperson for an organization is ever going to get fired for saying we're a customer centric organization. For me, the frustration is we typically do not do it very well from the perspective of here's all the data that I have and here's how we could be customer centric through data. Yeah. Typically what we do is we sell products. We know the products that make us the most money. So how do I be customer centric? How do I make that a pleasing experience for you as I try to do that product? Now that's a very extreme way of putting it, but we confuse a good customer experience within a product-centric framework with customer centricity.
I like the whole idea of that integration of the hotel with the healthcare. Perhaps that is the way that the hotel can come back post-pandemic, although I have no doubt they will be able to come back strong after the pandemic. But my thought of that, the challenges perhaps is that the privacy. Now, obviously, we all respect privacy, and maybe the challenges that I find is that the privacy tend to be a little bit stronger in certain businesses, but not so strong as a concern in other part of our life. Say, for example, as much as some people might like to claim that I don't want Facebook to know all my data so that he can serve me everything that I just browse with the app to sell me things. But to some extent, it is not as invasive, or maybe is not as a bigger concern of the health data, because it almost becoming too much for people to handle, to say, some organization knows too much about my health data, and I'm kind of worried because that is just too sensitive. Do you think that is sort of the challenges, the unfair challenges that you are facing?
Yeah, I think there are two parts to that. The first part is we only have ourselves to blame, because as an industry, as an analytics industry, and then as the industries who have taken advantage in the best possible way of data, we've just done it badly. So we will collect data, and then we'll have that very product-centric, view of how to use that data. And so, so I'll give you an example. I don't know if you can see on my camera over there, a whole bunch of golf clubs. I really love golf, right? Now, my favorite golf retailer, I researched the bag that I wanted. I researched it over and over again. I'm registered with their website, so I did all my surfing on their website under my registered name. I went into the store with my store card. I bought that bag, and I brought that bag home. Now, they know that I bought the bag. Now, for those people who have ever played golf, the next thing that you buy after buying a $300-400 golf bag is not another golf bag. And yet, what did that retailer do? They said, you looked at this golf bag. Here's some more emails about that golf bag. And I'm thinking, it's right here. Why are you sending me more? Like, I'm not going to buy another bag.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So organisations traditionally have not, we have not covered ourselves in glory with how we've used your data. And so, of course, consumers are going to say, well, you know, I give you all this data and you just serve me up rubbish. Why would I give you the right to more of my data? So that's the first thing. We have ourselves to blame. The second thing is, you know, I honestly believe, and we spoke about this earlier on, you know, I honestly believe that the way to cut through and get impact with data and analytics is not with another data scientist or better code, it's with communication, right? And so I had a great communication team that I accidentally inherited at National Australia Bank. We had great success through that team. The first new headcount that I was able to create at Bupa, the first thing I did was hire a head of change and communications. So now that is me leaning towards, you know, you say consumers don't want to hand up any more data, privacy. We are just doing a rubbish job of letting the consumer know, hey, we've learned our lessons. We promise not to do that rubbish stuff. If you let us have this data, here's the stuff that we could do for you. Yeah. And, you know, trying to be truly customer-centric, to say to the customer, when I talk to you, I'm going to make a commitment that I've taken all the data that you've given us the privilege to, and I always use that word privilege. I've taken all the data that you've given us the privilege of access to, and we think this is the most relevant thing to talk to you about. Now, have to accept that we'll get that wrong, because it may not be the most relevant thing, but based on all our best efforts, this is the most relevant thing. And, you know, privacy and security of data, those are unbelievably important things, but they shouldn't be the things that stop us doing better for consumers. And we just need to be better at telling the story of the art of the possible with our consumers. And we just need to hold ourselves to higher levels of account.
I think with all those data collected from all of these services and insurance, it certainly would help to paint that a clearer picture of the customer, 360-degree point of view. I think that is the buzzword that is going around quite a little bit at the moment. I think more importantly, though, is that if we were to be able to achieve that utopia of 360-degree of the understanding of the customer, how can you use this data and knowledge to improve the health of the customer? I think that is the most important outcome.
Yeah, look, I honestly think that so having spent 10 years in medical research full time, a lot of our research is constrained, quite rightly, is constrained to the protocol of the study. So I'm going to try to predict bowel cancer. I think these might be the thing. I'm going to collect smoking history. I'm going to try to collect, you know, do you like your beef, you know, black and burnt or rare? Do you eat a lot of processed foods? But you have to be very, very specific around the data you're going to collect. So where the constraint on all that is the discovery of protective behaviours or destructive behaviours for our health is constrained by the knowledge of the health researcher. This is the data that I'm going to collect. This is the data I'm going to extract from the database, and be very, very, very specific. I think there is a role to play for, you know, data science of some sort or statistics of some sort to collect all of this health information and say, hey, I've just been stomping around in this data with my big dirty boots. I've completely blown up, you know, the type 1 error, type 2 error by just multiple testing, playing with, you know, looking at an infinite number of things. But I just want to let you know, there's this thing over here in the data. It's really weird. I haven't seen any research paper that has linked this behavior to this disease. So I'm going to surface that, and I want to let the health community know about this thing. Now, it may just be a chance finding. It may just be an anomaly, but somebody with some expertise should take this and explain why we should or shouldn't do this research, because this is what the data has said. It's not what a health researcher, highly intelligent as they are, constrained to their understanding of their problem. We have a vast, vast, vast richness of people's longitudinal health history, the outcomes. You know, did your body generate this disease or not? And there might just very possibly be some behaviours early in life that lead you down a bad health path that we just don't know about. And I'm confident it's in there in the data. So I can't even remember what your question was, Jason, but if I had access to all the data, I am confident I would give those smart health researchers more, I won't necessarily say better, but more hypotheses to chase down.
I think technology has a role to play where it comes to the data collection. What that basically means is it has got to be almost like collecting the data in the background for us without us having to manually input all of those information. I think that is probably the way that we can collect more data and use them to improve the health. Go for it.
So, you know, I don't do this on a work computer. Do it on your private computer. But this technology is emerging. Look up smart toilets. So a lot of what your doctor wants to understand about the performance of your body is actually in the information that you flush down the toilet from two parts of your body. Right? So these smart toilets are finding ways to, you know, you go in, you do what you need to do, but it analyzes the contents, right?
Yeah.
Now, if we can get a long-term history of what's deposited in the toilet and then correlate that back to adverse outcomes, you know, way down the path, you know, that is, to your point, the technology, it should just be monitoring us.
Yeah.
We should just be collecting that data. And if we could just collect that data and then, you know, build out better data sets for health research, you know, why wouldn't we be doing that?
Yeah, and smartwatch is probably the other one that is playing a huge role. And it seems though that a lot of those platforms, such as the data collected by the Apple Watch for the health data, it seems like most of those platforms are not really taking off though. Is that the impression that you got? Because that is the impression that I'm getting from speaking from the actuaries who work in the life insurance. And because of that, we are still limited with the data that we are collecting. Yeah,
I think so. A lot of insurance. So just to explain a little bit of that. Some insurance is community rated. So it's actually you're not allowed to say, you know, Antony's overweight by this amount and he drinks heavily and smokes heavily and doesn't sleep and eats fried food. So we're going to make his health insurance more expensive. For health insurance in Australia, at least, you need to average it out.
Correct.
So Antony's up, Jason's down, etc. So the wearables for corporate actuarial purposes is a bit of a tough. It's a bit of a tough sell at the moment. But certainly, you know, the wearables and all that information then to feed into that medical research and understanding of risk factors. I think that is still emerging. So I think that is a watch this space type of scenario.
I agree, and is also about playing out that narrative correctly, which is coming back to the point that you were describing earlier. How do we communicate, especially for the data analytics, right? How do we communicate this narrative about these wearable devices, where yes, it cannot be used in the pricing because it's community rated, but then what other narrative that can play out to reward them? And I think that's probably something that the health insurer and life insurer are already experimenting. So it is the space to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, and the health disruptors and the medical researchers, it's easy enough for people to look online and actually find some great use cases around wearables. But I think we've only just started. The opportunities in front of us. I'm jealous that I don't have the imagination of some of the people who are putting these things together.
Now, to conclude this part, and I think you probably already spoke a lot about that, but I think it's still a good idea to spell it out. What are the benefits that you anticipate coming out of this data-driven approach to customer-centric healthcare?
Yeah, I'll extend it beyond. I'll extend it beyond healthcare, and I already kind of mentioned it before. You know, consumers just expect better from us. You know, switching is easy. There is choice out there. Global players are coming into, you know, what has been a very and not just in health insurance, I'm talking about all domains. Yep. Very siloed domestic markets, global players are coming in. So there is choice, there is, you know, low friction to switching, etc. And consumers are more and more aware of the data that they provide these organisations. So their expectation is, I give you all this information, but you treat me like you don't know me. How is that possible? So, to give you an example, and I won't...
Can I just highlight one example, which is calling to the call center? I still have to answer 20 questions to 20 people to tell them who am I and what I am hoping to achieve. Go on.
Absolutely. I won't name the bank, and it won't be obvious which bank it is. But you know, my wife and I we're just reconsolidating our banking, right? So we're not buying any new assets. We're not selling any assets down. We at the end of the day, the net of our banking is the same. We're just simplifying a little bit. And my wife and I, in that bank's database, we have been living the same address for many years. They can see my pay and they can see her pay going into the same account. They can see so much information that says Antony and his wife are a couple. And I won't bore you with the details, but one of our investments is constructed in a way that my wife owns it, but I'm the guarantor for it.
Yeah.
And we've had that relationship for many, many, many years. Because we're just changing account numbers, I have to go and see a lawyer. The two of us have to physically go and see a lawyer to re-sign these papers that we've already signed in the past, where they have all this information, so that the lawyer can say, Antony, I just want you to understand that if something goes, you are the guarantor for this. But that is the opposite of adding value to my life, when I couldn't tell you how much money I've made for you as a customer, because I paid fees and I paid interest, and you know, and I've introduced other customers to the organisation. I've given you so much information to show you that I am a good customer. My wife is a good customer. We are a tight unit, and yet you're making me in COVID. I don't want to go see strangers. You're making me go see this stranger and sit down over a table signing these. That is not customer centric. Yet you have all my information that says, you know what? Pretty good chance Antony and his partner, they understand this, right? So the that customer centricity piece, consumers are desperate for organisations to treat them, not to treat them better. We get treated pretty well, particularly in Australia. But just treat me like you know me. Give me the advantage that you can give me through knowing all this information about me. And we typically don't get that. We still get a very product-centric approach from these organisations. So again, not naming individual banks, but many banks still report their annual results as this is how the mortgage business performed this year. This is how the credit card business performed this year. The deposits business did this. I don't see myself as a mortgage customer or a credit card customer or a deposits. I see myself as a bank customer. But you measure your performance, you measure your success down product-centric lines. And yes, you measure NPS and there'll be some other customer metrics, but the weight of your focus is still very product-centric. Flip that to be customer. And I have this confidence that the organisations that get this right, they will just come flooding to you.
It's funny that how that reminded me the interview of Jeff Bezos back in 1990 something, where the journalist was questioning him about how arrogant you are. You think that you could just come into one industry and another industry and another industry, and you expect yourself to win in all of these games. How is that possible? And how Jeff was answering the question was that no, we don't think that we were going to win. We don't suggest that we will necessarily win. But what we do know is that we take a customer-centric view about understanding and helping and providing the value to the customer. In the long run, the probability of us of winning would be there. And it must be so unreal to watch that interview back in the 1990 when Jeff was championing the customer-centric approach rather than, whatever that works at that time. I just thought it's unreal. I suspect that it's probably still a bit unreal as of we are talking now, that is not necessarily the view that has been picked up, or at least pick up and put into practice for the customer.
Absolutely. And again, I said it right at the start, just look at the organizations that are scaling globally at an enormous rate. And I mentioned all the usual ones. I forgot to mention Apple. Very, very, very data-centric. Very data-centric organization. They've understood right from the get-go, and they've put a lot of focus at the start into their data. And like I said, they bet the house that data was going to help them win.
Now, talking about data, one of the key things that often come out is sometimes organizations struggle with having too much data and not knowing what to do with it. So what is your perspective on determining how to identify the data that is important to an organization for understanding consumer needs?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you're right. Organizations have far more data than they actually give themselves credit for. So my first principle with any data program will always be, if you touch it, you bring it all in. So if you're going into the customer file and you're just grabbing customer number and name, make sure you get street address, make sure you get number of dependents, make sure you get everything. Now there are some things that you need to mask, and there are some that you'll never use, but it's easier to get everything and delete things later than it is to say, hey, I solved this problem for you, but gee, it'd be better if we had variable X. Well, now we need to start another data program to go and get that. So when you've got the hood up, go get everything. And then the second, and so that will give you too much data. That will always give you too much data. But then the second thing will be, deliver what the organisation has asked you to deliver. As a minimum, deliver that. But while you're doing that work, the data scientist, the BI specialist will know it's actually not a lot of extra work to bring this other variable in and this other variable. And so that at some point you can say, hey, here's the report that you asked for, or here's the model that you asked for with these specific variables. But I just want to let you know, this is what you asked for. Here it is. It's ready to go. We can deploy this. But I just want to let you know, these other things over here, you didn't ask for them. We thought we'd get them because it wasn't too much extra effort. And it helped the model. Or there's this, I got this extra thing and we're able to put an extra filter on your report. And as you filter by this thing, all this insight just pops. But if you just look at this very high level, it's kind of bland and average. But this filtering, for the data scientists who say, I don't do BI, so the BI is, let's say it's 75% of the data science work. You be the person who builds that BI and then apply your data science into that BI so that the human being who receives that report, their eyeballs are just looking at a ridiculous amount of information. So you can say, hey, everything that you're looking at, most of it's just noise. On average, it's the same strike rate. It's about 5% across the entire consumer base. But I just want to let you know, people aged 15 to 25 in Brisbane who have bought this product, their strike rate of 5%, it's 40%. For some reason, these people, but you never asked for all those extra variables, so we would never have been able to find it. So I'm just going to apply my science. I'm going to help you find those outliers. And so, when you say helping organisations understand how much data, work with them, help them get the stuff that they asked for, but always remember that there's nothing stopping you from getting extra information, too much information, and you never stop at what they asked for. It is your responsibility. I think it's our responsibility as an industry to say, this is what you asked for, but I just want to let you know, this is noise, this is signal. And people are desperate. I think people are desperate for that capability. And then all of a sudden, what you've done is you've won the right for the next problem to go get the data that they asked for and that little bit extra. And slowly but surely, you're building out, that enterprise data warehouse. Now, quality, connectedness, etc. That's the data governance team's remit. But you are showing the art of the possible. Yeah. And if you only ever just deliver what was asked for, you're never going to give the discipline, your capability, the opportunity to shine.
Now, to conclude this, how would you advise others to navigate successfully to bring more data and analytic capability into a customer-centric doing their businesses?
So coaching individuals into, so let me get that right, coaching individuals into bringing more data in?
Yep, coaching the organization to use data and analytic to build up the customer-centric view of the world in running their own business.
Yep.
Organization.
Yeah, so there are many, many, many ways, many strategy packs that are important to write and present, etc. But the thing that I always come back to is I ask the question, right, you've asked me, you want us to just get this slice of information about this product. Is that what the customer wants? We spoke before about the privilege of giving you all this information, and I expect as a customer, you bring me more value and more opportunity. Always ask yourself the question, is this what the customer would expect of us? This very thin slice, or the entire knowledge of Antony Ugoni. For me, I want you to take every piece of information that you know about me and come back to me with relevance. Come back with value. How are you going to make my life as a consumer? How are you going to make it better or easier? And so just always remind yourself, what does customer centricity mean with data? It means knowing your customer across everything that they do with your organization, not with your product, not with your channel. It is across the entirety. It is, I bought all these products. Some of them I bought in the store. Some of them I ordered online. Some of them I won in a raffle, whatever it might be. These are the things that I returned. These are the things that you have to know all of that, because I want you to know me across everything that I do with you.
I agree. And all of those things are completely achievable. It's all in the data.
It's all in the data.
It's all in the data. It's all traceable. We just need the people who knows how to bring all of them together with imagination, but also deliver the business outcome using the data.
Absolutely.
My final go-to question for every single one of my guests. Number one, what is your most important first principle?
Yeah, so again, so I'll just repeat exactly what we just said just then. My first principle is always, what is the customer expecting from us? What would the customer, if the customer knew everything that we collected on them, what would they expect from us? They would expect security, privacy, ethical treatment of my data, but they'd expect value, customer value back. So that is always, and principle number two is, think like the branch manager, think like the store manager, think like the cashier, think like the call center operator. Don't think like the data scientist. That's a day job. That's boring. Yeah. So think like a customer, and then think like the people and or the strategy or the problem that the organization is trying to solve. Yeah. Lift yourself up and out of the code.
I love it. Now, what is one book that you have read and thought it would have been better for your younger self to have?
Yeah. So I prepared for that. So I've got 3 books. I genuinely think everybody in data science, it is becoming the importance of statistics and probability theory, hypothesis testing, experimentation. It's having its day again. Organizations are understanding the importance of that. People think of it as an old-fashioned discipline. People make many, many, many mistakes just pursuing machine learning on its own. It's sexy, it's fun,
yes.
It's mysterious. I absolutely get it, and I've fallen for it as well. But unless you sample your data well, unless you know the assumptions that you're relying on in your data, and unless you understand the way you've designed the experiment and the limitations, then you will produce rubbish. So, my 2 favorite books in that domain, I've got the screen on, it is this book here.
Yep.
Full Analysis of Epidemiological Data by a guy called Steve Selvin. It's a famous book in epidemiology. And another one by David Clayton and Michael Hills. That one there. These are old versions of them, but these are fantastic books. And if you do nothing else, I'm not asking people to go out and do a master's degree in probability theory and statistics, etc. But if for your career, understand the difference between a case control study and a longitudinal study. Please, reach out to me. I'll happily have that conversation. The power of getting the sampling right means you can just do so much more with the data that you have at hand and the models that you build. But then the book that I wished I'd read earlier in life, and I've had this for a long time. My 16-year-old son, he was 2 when he got his hands on it, so it's scribbled on at the front. But it's this book here, and it's called "Fooled by Randomness" by that guy.
Nassim Nicholas. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And Nassim Nicholas Taleb. I said before, we have been very lucky to have loved this stuff from an early age, and we probably stumbled accidentally across amazing teachers. So we have been lucky. This book talks about the role of luck in your life. And I spoke before about humility. This was the book that I should have read much earlier. That would have given me that healthy dose of, yeah, Antony, you're good at this thing called maths, stats, eventually data science. But there is so much luck that went into where you are today, and acknowledging that, all those different things that could have happened in your life, acknowledging that it just gives you a perspective on life that is less privileged, less expectation, and it gives you, I shouldn't say it gives you, it's given me just the pleasure of life, because I acknowledge that I've been lucky. I've worked hard, but I've worked hard in an environment where I was lucky enough that work effort has paid off. So I use the word again, it is a humbling book, but put me back in my place.
I love it, especially that last bit of it, of how you were sharing the way that you see the world. That is something that is hard to come by. Thank you for opening up and sharing that. Luck always play a role to some extent in our life. I have been lucky for so many times and unlucky for a certain time, but it is what it is and make us unique. And thank you so much again for this podcast interview. And I think I have got so much out of this, not only just about the data and analytics and how it's being used to run a business, but some life philosophy as well. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for everything that you're doing for our community as well.
You're welcome.